Britain's Prime Minister says she's prepared to rip up human rights laws to ensure British police have the powers they need to tackle the terrorist threat.
If our human rights laws stop us from doing it, we'll change the laws so we can do it.
Hello, all three men who carried out the terror attack at London Bridge have now been named, and the British Prime Minister has announced a review by police and MI5. There are growing concerns that warnings about two of the attackers were not followed up. The third attacker was Yousef Zagba, a 22-year-old Italian national of Moroccan descent. Italian authorities say he was stopped from travelling to Syria last year, and his name was then shared with British authorities. This report from our home editor, Mark Easton.
The faces of a self-appointed death squad. We now know the identities of all three men who went on a killing spree in London on Saturday night. Today, police naming this man, Yousef Zagba, as the third member of the gang. Zagba was born in Fez in Morocco to a Moroccan father and Italian mother. 22 years old, he recently moved to East London, where he worked in a restaurant. But last year, he was stopped by security forces at Bologna airport in Italy on suspicion of trying to make his way to fight in Syria, literature relating to so-called Islamic State in his bag. Placed on the Italian terror watch list, UK police today said neither they nor MI5 regarded him as a person of interest. In Italy, a prosecutor claimed today the British authorities had been tipped off about Zagba, who lived in this house in Bologna. One of his relatives said he'd hoped to find a job in the UK.
He went to London. He was away for 2 or 3 months, then he came back. He was here for a month and then he told his mum, "I'm leaving because here there's nothing and in London I can work."
The fact that Zagba was a terror suspect in Italy adds to the pressure on British security services to explain why they were caught blind ahead of Saturday's terrible attack. Another member of the gang, of course, Khurram Butt, was well known to police and MI5, prompting searching questions as to whether more could or should have been done to prevent mass murder.
We will look at how the processes were followed, what they did. They will be wanting to look at that because they will want to learn lessons for the future if there are those lessons to be learned.
Butt appeared in this Channel 4 documentary
Anyone got a smartphone?
on radical Islamists last year, linking him to extremist preacher Anjem Choudhury, now in jail for encouraging support for so-called Islamic State. Despite this, security service interest in him was scaled down. The BBC has obtained Butt's CV, in which he describes himself as a motivated, zealous and trusted individual who'd worked in security, welcoming guests and securing buildings. He worked on the London Underground last year, Butt claiming his responsibilities included assisting customer evacuation where necessary. In Pakistan today, his uncle said he was ashamed and said his nephew's victims were constantly on his mind.
I don't know why they were killed. They came to the city to make their shopping, to make their dinners. Who will allow anyone to push them and to hit them and to die them? No religion allows.
Some have suggested the killings might have been prevented if any of the men had been subject to a court order known as a TPIM, restricting the movements of terror suspects who haven't been convicted of a crime. But the man who until recently officially reviewed terror legislation for the government says the orders are really aimed at a small number of individuals where strong evidence of terrorist activity exists but can't be used in open court for security reasons.
For that limited category of people, they're very useful. Where they don't help is in relation to people who can't be shown to have promoted terrorism or plotted terrorism, but who may be sympathetic to terrorists.
More detail emerged today about the last member of the three-man gang, North African-born Rashid Redouane. He was married to a British citizen and lived in Dublin for a time before relocating to East London. A house in Ilford was targeted in a counter-terrorism operation early today. At 11 o'clock this morning, Britain was encouraged to stop for 1 minute, to pause and to reflect on the events of Saturday night. Through the minds of many will have run the question, why did this have to happen? Mark Easton, BBC News, London Bridge.
Two victims of the attack were named today. Kirsty Bowden was a 28-year-old nurse from Australia who worked at nearby Guy's Hospital. A French man was also killed, 27-year-old Alexandre Pijard from Normandy. A second Australian national is also known to have died, not officially named yet. Across the UK, as Mark said, 11 this morning, there was a minute's silence to remember all the victims, the second in the space of a fortnight. Alison Holt reports.
A time to remember, a time to reflect on an attack at the heart of London. Time to stand together on the streets where it happened. The ambulance crews who fought so hard to save lives, London's mayor at their side. Manchester still raw from the violence inflicted here just 2 weeks ago. And beyond. In these quiet moments, for some, the anguish is too much. Nicola Smith wanted to remember her former boyfriend. James McMullen was one of the 7 people killed on Saturday.
I feel anger, but I can't let that override my feeling of love for James and our memories, because I know that's not what he wanted. Me as a person, I'm extremely angry. But because I've been with James, I know that I can't let anger win.
James and Chrissy Archibald, a Canadian social worker, were the first to be named as having lost their lives. Today, new names and faces have emerged. Among them, 27-year-old Alexandre Pijard, a French national working as a waiter at one of the Borough Market restaurants. His mother is said to be devastated. And 28-year-old Australian Kirsty Bowden. She was a newly promoted senior nurse at Guy's Hospital who ran to help others that night.
There was absolutely nothing at all she wouldn't do for somebody. She never saw bad in anybody. Even if they were all having a bad day, Kirsty was the person that was going to make you smile.
And then there are the missing. 45-year-old Xavier Thomas was last seen on London Bridge. Tonight, detectives appealed for information as it's feared he may have been thrown into the river during the attack. Sébastien Bélanger's family are travelling to the UK from France to try to discover what's happened to him. He was last seen outside one of the pubs on Saturday. There's also no word on the whereabouts of Ignacio Echeverria from Spain, or Sarah Zelenak, an Australian in London working as a nanny. Her family has heard nothing from her.
Sarah's absolutely beautiful. She is a very special, kindred spirit. She's one of those people that doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs, doesn't do anything wrong. She's amazing, and she's 21 years of age.
These remain desperate searches, desperate days for so many who have found themselves caught up in this tragedy. Alison Holt, BBC News.
The British Prime Minister has said she is prepared to change human rights laws if that's necessary to fight extremism. Theresa May, criticised by opponents for cutting thousands of police jobs as Home Secretary, was speaking just 2 days before the UK's general election. Her opponents in the Labour Party say what's needed is more money for policing and prisons. Our political editor Laura Koonsberg now on the final stages of a campaign dominated by questions about security.
The rallies, the battle buses, and him.
Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May.
This might look like a traditional Tory campaign, yet it's been anything but. Stalled by 2 terror attacks within weeks. So at the last minute in Slough tonight, a new promise.
I mean longer prison sentences for those convicted of terrorist offences. I mean, making it easier for the authorities to deport foreign terrorist suspects back to their own country. And if our human rights laws stop us from doing it, we'll change the laws so we can do it.
She's vowed to get on with all that on Friday if you let her keep the red boxes. But she's been challenged on her own record on security in the days since the London attack.
Do you fear, as many members of the public might do, that there were intelligence failures in this case? Or do we have to accept in 2017 that no matter how hard we try, some terrorists may slip through?
The Police and Security Service have done a good job in foiling a number of plots, just 5 in the last 3 months, and a significant number since in the last few years. They will want to learn lessons for the future, if there are those lessons to be learned. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Security may be a political help as well as a hindrance to Mrs May.
We have the Tory party having to ask very serious questions about whether or not the security approach was good enough.
And we've answered those questions.
I think people feel a lot safer in their beds supporting Theresa May. I certainly do.
Beyond the smiles of the campaign, the oh-so-casual conversations, the most serious of subjects follow the trail's last few days. Yet Labour's crowd's enthusiasm's undimmed.
Jeremy Corbyn is cheered to the rafters almost everywhere he goes. But just as Theresa May faces questions about her security record, he too is under pressure.
Everywhere we go, the crowds get bigger.
Yet how would he combat terror?
We're all worried that this could happen again. That does require, obviously, vigilance, but it does require proper resources, and therefore cutting police numbers and not funding sufficiently those that are involved in security is a problem, and so we will put 10,000 more police officers available to go on the beat, because that also helps community safety and community confidence.
You can't cut 20,000 policemen off the beat and expect the same security you have before they've been cut. That's just not possible.
It's not the ideological approach that Theresa May is taking, that we have to kind of police people's minds. It really is about numbers of people on the ground.
I think we need to just look after each other, love one another. I think that's more important.
A stridently different tone from UKIP.
Islamist extremism is a cancer within our society, and it is a cancer that needs to be put out.
The Lib Dems also on the back foot in this campaign, urging caution.
Sadly, we discover that those people guilty of the pathetic, cowardly murders in Manchester and London in the last fortnight are people who are known to the security services. The question is not intelligence and new powers, it's having the resources to be able to keep us safe.
Security, though, one of the few issues that matters in every corner of the country.
We have an opportunity in Scotland to send a real message about the kind of country we want to be. Theresa May's on the ropes in this election. It's no longer inevitable that she'll get a bigger majority.
Events have changed this campaign maybe like no other. Few would have predicted this.
Can you bring it up, please, for our rally that's taking place in Brighton?
A Labour rally screened live in 6 places around the country. A rock star here, but we all determine who finds the pot of gold.